Hey, hi. In this video, we are going to handle a modern CSS style single select dropdown using a combination of Selenium and Java. Okay, so here I am at my IDE. I have already created my class and added a few setup steps. That is, like I'm creating a driver and managing the timeouts and maximizing the reach. And for today's demo, we would be using Semantic UI site. This is a framework that is used by developers to get ready-made UI elements so that they can only tweak it and use it ahead. Okay, so using these kind of pages for practicing gives you an added advantage of working with elements that are production ready. Okay, so you kind of get an experience on it, and in production you would be actually handling these kind of scenarios, so it's pretty good for practice purposes. Okay, so let's get back and start coding. Okay, I've already written my driver.get. So next, let's select the drop down we would be working on. So I think select friend, this one would be good. So let's just inspect this element. Right. So when you're working with CSS drop downs, the thing that we did it previously, like we cannot just put it to a select class, right? We cannot give it to a select class because, as you can see, this is implemented using a div class, and this will not be supported. Okay. So what to do? So what's the solution for this? So actually, we can just follow the very basics of automation over here. So what is the basic? The basic is automate the things that is done by the user. So if you are a user, what would you do to select a drop down or select an option from a drop down, right? You would open the page, go to the drop down, click on it, then choose what you want to choose. Okay, so let's you chose mat, right? So we would be following this same process, right? So over here, I have actually opened my web page. So my first step is done. Next is selecting this, right? And okay, so the question that you might get, like, is it necessary to click on this? Right? Why can't we just get these elements, because these are always on the page. Like if you look at this web element over here in the inspect elements tab, and you open these icons, right? You open these classes, these div tags, you will see that yeah, there is something over here. You have item, you have data values. Can we do that directly? Well, actually we cannot. If you try to do it, we will get an error. Okay, let's just try that once. So I'm going to try clicking on Jenny without clicking on this web UI first, or without clicking on this element first to expose that, right? So let me just make an XPath for this. Uh, slash div tag where at the rate class equal to item and at the rate. Okay, so with this XPath, we have got exactly one matching element. Let's go back to our ID and try clicking on it. Okay, so now let's execute this. Okay, so let's have a look at our console logs. I can see we got an error, and that's element not interactable exception. Okay, so we cannot directly go and click on the options. So now let's try doing the thing that is expected. Let's first click on the download, expand the download, and then select. Okay, let's do that. So for that, first I would need an XPath to find this element, which might be a complicated scenario. Actually, the entire complicacy of handling a CSS dropdown is coming up with an XPath or coming up with a CSS selector for performing these tasks. And these in hindsight provide a very good practice for your XPath concepts. So if you are familiar with XPath or if you are familiar with CSS, go ahead, pause the video and try to come up with an XPath or CSS selector to find this particular element. Okay, so moving ahead, I'll do the same. So there is something I can see over here, that we have a big class that would actually keep changing depending on what is selected, what is not selected, and then if it is expanded or whether it's not expanded. But I can see that we have got an input tag over here which is type hidden and its name is user, and I guess this should be unique. But this is not what we are trying to select. We are trying to get the entire dev class. So what I can do is create an XPath that searches for a div tag whose child is an input tag with the name user. So it can be something like this. So this gives me exactly one matching UI element of one matching node. Or I've used a contains method and I'm searching for a div tag that has got a class UI, which will always be there, and it also has a child that is an input tag which has a name attribute that is named user. Okay, so let's get this web element. Okay, so here I am clicking on it just to verify that we have got the correct element or not. Let's just run this once. Well, something seems amiss because it did not click on it. So let's go back and look at our output. Why is it so slow today? Hmm. Okay, we did not comment out the previous one. That's why. Things like that, like this, can actually happen a lot. Right, now let's run this, and this time it will give us the proper output. I'll close the previous one. Yeah, and there we have it. It clicked on it. Now for the next step, let's try and get in all the options that are present in that particular dropdown. Okay, now since we are not using the static class of Selenium, we do not have the luxury of using its get options method to get all the available options, right? So how do we go about achieving this task? Okay, so as I said earlier, playing around or handling these kind of drop downs is all a game of using your XPath or you're using your locators. So right now we already have the entire div element, right? We have already extracted that and saved it in a web element, named it dropdown. So next what we want to do, or we have to do rather, is get these elements, these div tags that have a class item to them, right? So these are our selectable elements from the already extracted div class. And to do that, I can do something like this. I can go over here and then in my drop down element, I can do a find elements. Why did we do it in with context with reference to the particular web element? Because we have already extracted the web element, right? There is no need to search the entire page again. Okay, so inside this I will again do a by dot. Right now I can see we would be searching using class, so I can just do a by dot class name, right? Dot class name, and then its class name is item. Okay, and let's save this in a list of web elements. Like the return type of find elements is a list. So list, list of what? A list of web elements. Let's name it drop down elements. Okay, and let's just print this out once to verify that we have done the right thing. I'll do a for each, give a v and as out, and do v dot get text, because this is a list of web elements, right? So we are extracting the text from it. And let's just run this once and check. One test case passed, and here I have all the available options. Good. So next, let's click on one of these options, or let's select one of these options. Now, clicking on an available option is actually pretty simple. We have already clicked on the drop down and expanded it. Now, next, we just need to click on one of these options. Let's say we want to click on Jenny, right? So I'll go back to my IDE here again, taking drop down as context, drop down dot find element, because I'm searching for a singular element this time, by dot let's say XPath, and once again search for a div tag which has a attribute data value that is equal to Jenny, which has got an at the rate data value which is equal to Jenny. And here I'll do a simple dot click, right? So let's execute this and see what happens. So I can see over here that Jenny got selected and my test case has also passed. Okay, so we saw that the option Jenny was selected by the script, but how do we go about verifying this, right? We cannot just have a look on the browser that is being run at, because we might not be there when the automation script runs, right? That's the whole purpose of automation. So how do we go about verifying this? Okay, so for that, let me first refresh this page, and then let's have a look at the changes that takes place when we select the particular element, right? So let's go to that element. I will expand this over here, and I can see right now in my input tag I've got a hidden, and I've got name, and I've got few other things. Let's open this. Okay, there were a few changes that took place, and let's just click on Jenny. Okay, so now as I've selected this, I can see that there is a new attribute to my input tag, right? That is a value attribute, mm, and it's named as Jenny. Okay, so in other words, this value attribute tells me which property is actually selected. We can use this as our verification. So in my code, I can just extract this value, this particular attribute, and that will tell me which option is selected, right? So over here I would go back and just do a drop down element, drop down, or rather I would have to say this drop down will give me the entire div class. I want to go inside the input tag, right? So I will go to a drop down dot again, find element by dot XPath this time, and I will search for an input tag. Okay, I already have that in my above XPath. I'll just copy that from there. Search for an input tag, right? And I will extract dot get attribute. What's the attribute that we are trying to extract? We are trying to extract value, value, right? And let's print this just to verify. So I'll do an s out again, and just give a demarcator over here. Okay, so let's run this. Let's look at the logs, and it prints Jenny. So Jenny was actually selected. Okay, so using these, you can actually write almost all the cases that would be related to your drop downs, right? Your single select drop down. Okay, next we'll have a look at the multi select drop down. Thank you and hope you have a good day.